of the history of the preparations made in relation to the Correctional Services contract for security fencing?
Yes, Chair.
And what you've told the Chair that took place over several months was all before the fencing tender was eventually advertised.
That is correct, Chair.
When was the fencing tender advertised? You deal with that in paragraph 27.14.
I'm just trying to find my space, Chair. 25, 26, 27.14. Sorry, Chair, I'm taking my time.
No, that's
Chair,
fine.
if I can just mention, I remember the other company now, Mr. Jakubits's company.
Yes.
It seems to be jogging my memory.
Yes.
Just for the record, it was called Siyaya Fencing.
Siyaya fencing.
Correct.
Okay, that would be S-I-Y-A-Y-A fencing.
Correct.
Thank you.
Right. When was the fencing tender advertised?
Well, the fencing tender was advertised on the 14th of November 2005.
Sorry, just check that date, please.
27.14.
Yes.
14th of October 2005, it was advertised
Right. By whom?
by the Department of Correctional Services.
Was the contract eventually awarded?
Chair, the contract was awarded to Pezulu on the 29th of November 2005.
That's roughly 6 weeks after the fencing tender was first advertised.
Correct.
So advertised 14 October, awarded 6 weeks later. How long would each bidder have to prepare documents and submit?
Depends, Chair, if they would have to visit the sites. Because when the tender's advertised, they normally have a site briefing session. That takes a day. Then normally what happens is the bidders would have to go to site and understand the site itself, the 47 sites. Now with the electronic GPS theodolite, you can do it in maybe 47 days. If you don't have a GPS theodolite, it's going to take you pretty much longer. So they were given 6 weeks to do it. I can tell you now it was virtually impossible for anybody to put in a bid that was of substantial value like this in that period of time.
The bid documents, the information that any company that wanted to bid for this tender would have had to include information about all of these sites.
That is correct.
And would that be information that would be difficult to get unless you visited the sites, or is it information that could be obtained by use of technology in one way or another?
The only technology that could have perhaps been used was the theodolite. I don't think Google Maps was really working well at that stage. So in today's time, you could perhaps do it with Google Maps. But that would still be a stretch.
But that was 2005.
That was 2005. There was no Google Maps then.
So whereas Bosasa, we know that on paper their name was not going to appear in regard to this tender.
Correct.
But in effect, Bosasa and that may have been intended, maybe I should say was, on your evidence, intended by certain individuals within correctional services to ultimately effectively benefit from this. Bosasa was given a number of months before even the tender was advertised or the bids were invited.
Okay, that is correct.
Yes, and then anyone else would have had only about 6 weeks to submit their bid, is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you. Do you know or do you not know whether this short period that was given to everyone else was deliberately intended to minimize the chances of anybody else putting up any tender that would really compete with effectively Bosasa's tender, although in the name of Pezulu? Or was this the period that was normal to be given for tenders?
Chair, it was not the normal period because everybody knew that this was very tight timing. They could have given them, there are some tenders out at the moment. I'm busy working on one where you have a 3 months response time. This was specifically made 6 weeks, not the normal 30 days, but 6 weeks to say, no, but we have made it longer than normal.
But with special reference to correctional services, are you able to say what the normal period they normally allowed to bidders to put in their bids in regard to other tenders at that time?
At that time, I don't want to speculate, Chair, but let me give you an example. The PPPs, we had up to a year to put in the bid document. On the catering tender, I think it was 30 days on the one. On another one, there was 60 days. So it varies from each one.
Yeah, okay.
You can see in this one, there was specifically, the time was limited for a reason.
Okay, thank you.
You referred to the PPPs. What were those?
Those are public-private partnerships. I headed up a consortium to submit tenders for the building of the private prisons. Previously, that was cancelled.
Let's just go back to this 6-week time period. One doesn't have to go into too much detail in relation to the tender process, but an invitation to bid would be advertised.
That is correct.
Which you say happened on the 14th of October 2005.
That is correct, Chair.
There would then, as you've already mentioned, be a process of interaction between the various bidders and the correctional services.
That is correct.
There would then be the submission of the bid.
That is correct.
And then the bid would still have to be evaluated,
That is correct.
go through several committees, and finally be awarded.
That is correct, Chair.
So given the process that normally takes place in relation to tenders, that 6-week period from advertisement to award is not the period for the submission of the tender or the response to the bid, invitation to bid.
Correct.
That's a lesser period than 6 weeks.
Chair, he's actually correct.
And what was the period for the submission of the bids from the time of advertising or inviting bids?
Chair, I don't have that information available. I was not intricately involved with this bid.
Okay.
But what Advocate Pretorius just mentioned is 100% correct. There were 4 weeks literally left.
Yes.
They must have used the minimum time. So it wasn't 6
Yes.
weeks, it was 4 weeks.
Yes, okay, all right, thank you. And then of course, if it is 4 weeks, if it was 4 weeks, then on your evidence, there is simply, objectively speaking, no way that any bidder would have been able, you say, to visit all these 47 sites.
Impossible.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
And it's not as if correctional services wouldn't have appreciated this, is that so?
Correct, Chair.
Thank you.
And the value of this contract was what?
It was 486,937,910 rand.
R500 million.
Well, that wasn't the total value. Eventually, it grew and grew and grew. I cannot recall, but that R500 million, that is correct.
That was that more or less R500 million. Was that the value that was known to everybody at the time of bidding?
That was the submission value.
Yeah, okay.
But you will recall earlier, I also alluded to the fact that there is, like with the other tender, with the catering tender, I wasn't involved with the pricing of this one, but basically, there's ways and means that you get variation orders and you grow the tender. And I can't recall who the accountant was at that stage, but he was, I remember, he was a bright person, but they manipulated figures as well, if I recall correctly. And I actually caught them out at one stage. I will recall the name later on.
Thank you.
You say in paragraph 27.15 that this project ran its course, but there was a further contract awarded. Tell the Chair about that, please.
Well, there was a maintenance contract. So after you've implemented the fence, you need a maintenance contract. Like when you implement CCTV, you need a security guard control room contract. So there was a maintenance contract which was supposed to run, I think it was for 3 years thereafter, and it was billed separately.
And to whom was that contract awarded?
It was internally awarded from Pezulu to Sondolo IT.
Did this contract award go through a tender process?
No.
Were you involved in the execution of the contract after it had been awarded to Pezulu Fencing Pty Limited?
Chair, I would give oversight when I had to, but I wasn't interested in it. I really wasn't.
Right. Did you have anything to do with Beta Fence Pty Limited?
Yes, unfortunately, I would have to attend on behalf of the BE shareholders. I would have to go to meetings. Occasionally, I would take one or two of the directors with me so that we appeared as a company to be BEE.
Right. And did you have anything to do with dividends arising out of the finances of Beta Fence Pty Limited?
Yes, I did.
What role did you play there?
Chair, when you have a shareholder and they're entitled to dividends, the dividends are normally paid into their bank account. Correct. The problem comes in when you've played games with the dividends, with shareholding, and where does the shareholding now go, the dividends now get paid to? Because you're talking considerable amounts of money. So the instruction to me was to instruct the attorney that the dividends that would come to Bopa and Bafoba would basically be paid into the trust account of the attorneys, which is Mr. Brian B. Buck.
Well, he might have held that trust account on behalf of the shareholders.
Well, that's not true, Chair.
And we know that the two trusts were 26% shareholders of Beta Fence at that time.
That is correct.
And did it eventually transpire that the shares of Pezulu Fencing Pty Limited were transferred after the contract had now been awarded by Correctional Services into the names of the trusts Bopa and Pafoga?
That is correct. Tony Perry was the company secretary at the time, and he arranged that.
All right. So Pezulu Fencing is awarded the contract, and in terms of a prior arrangement, Bosasa, in its most general sense, takes control and ownership of Pezulu Fencing.
In terms of, that is correct to put it that way.
Do you know who were the trustees in the two trusts that you have told about?
Chair, I cannot give you the trustees' names. I'm sure they're on record.
But you know some of them. Was Mr. Governor Watson not
No,
one of the trustees? Or not really?
Chair, what I can tell you is there's normally about 10 people that sits on various boards.
Yeah.
And they would have been one of those people
Yeah.
because they get swapped around a lot.
Yes.
So as
Yeah.
it suited them, they would move around. And
Yes.
this month it would be Joe Gumedi. Next month it will be Carol Mkele. The month after that it would be Munarai de Oliveira. And it would change. So I can't
Okay.
remember
No, that's
exactly.
fine.
And
Yeah.
unfortunately, Chair, I don't have documents available. I rely on what I've got.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Well, on paper, we have as the real beneficiaries of the Correctional Services fencing contract, Pazulu Fencing and its shareholders, the Bopa and Pafocha Trusts.
Correct.
From your own knowledge, who is the real beneficiary of the contract?
Well, Gavin Watson and his family. Ultimately, that's how it worked.
Let's move on then to page 57 and paragraph 28 of your statement. You speak there of a meeting with Mr. Gillingham in late 2005.
That's right.
What happened there? We're now dealing with a new contract.
Chair, what happened was, it was in 2005, I was at the offices and I bumped into Mr. Gillingham for about the fourth time. And Danny Mansell was with him, as a matter of fact. And we were having a 5-minute informal discussion, and one of the things that he raised was that the televisions were problematic in correctional facilities because offenders are not there because they are stupid. They're there because they're very clever. So they would get TV agreements with these early bird and those hiring companies who would put a TV in their cell and they just don't pay. Very difficult for someone to come fetch it. But there was major issues with TVs and TV programs that were watched at night. And that's basically what he discussed with us. And he said, can I design a system where you have a centrally distributed TV management program that, let me try and explain it. So in other words, what would happen is they wanted a system where each cell right around the country had a TV screen that would be able to be programmed so that you could decide as the head of prison what they would watch, what volume you would set it, and what would be distributed to that television. They wanted a bit further, take it a step further, to network all of these together and create a system whereby, for instance, if the minister, who at that stage would want to speak to every offender, he could stand in one place and we would be able to stream over IP nationally. So I designed a system like that for them.
You designed it?
Well, together with assistance, yes.
Yes, okay.
But can I continue?
Yes?
Just deal with the rating requirement, please.
Okay. So the rating of the system would have to be an IP65, which is Ingress Protection 65, which means that the unit had to be waterproof and vandal resistant. So it was a unit that we needed to make sure that nobody could break it, nobody could tamper with it, and nobody could splash water on it because it would become very expensive to repair. Can I continue?
Yes, and would you just tell the chair when you continue how it came about that you received instructions to design this system?
Well, Mansell and Gavin Watson indicated to me that their department, because obviously they were talking a lot with Richmond T, who was the commissioner, Patrick Gillingham, who was then made the CFO. So they said that the correctional services had surplus funds in their budget, and they needed to use it quickly. And the problem with that is if they don't use their funding, this is what I was told, it goes back to Treasury and it goes back into the big pot, and somebody else will get to it. So what needed to happen was they said to me, I need to go ahead with the design of the television system, and I must make sure that it has to incorporate a network that's interfaced, because in the future, we can use that network. So set up the infrastructure, the network infrastructure there, and later on you can use that network infrastructure that you've put in to transmit the data on TV, which you can then use, where you can at a later stage, you can then on-sell extra products that hook on, to the system. So, sorry, I'm Italian, I'm born in South Africa, but I talk with my hands. So unless I sit on my hands.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. So they wanted a network in there so that you could then plug in other value adds. For instance, cell phone detection. One of them was video thermal imaging, because sodomy was a major problem. We were experiencing the same problem at the youth centers. And you're not allowed to, according to our law, you're not allowed to put cameras where people change or sleep, but you may put thermal imaging in because you're not getting a clear picture, you're getting thermal imaging pictures. So that was one of the future plans as well. So the whole idea was to create this network using the TV camera systems and create it so that we could plug in other internet protocol devices. Does that answer the question, sir?
Yes, thank you. Were there talks at the time about computerizing the offender management system?
Correct. At that stage as well, one of the biggest problems because we were working daily with correctional services, we understood the issues. One of the things that they had needed was an integrated computerized offender management system. So we were given the documents to design a system on what basis, like all the correctional services forms. I think Gillingham actually spent time with some of our people in the IT division actually designing a system. I don't know if it's been implemented yet, but it was a fully encompassing system that designed from the offender's court appearances right the way through to what to do with his body if he needed to be buried or repatriated.
Right. You have told the Chair that you, in conjunction with others, did in fact design such a system.
That is correct.
Your design, I presume, was incorporated in a single document?
That is correct.
What did you do with that document?
That document was given to Danny Mansell and became part of a tender specification.
Was it given to anyone else?
It was, if I remember correctly, sorry, I just want to catch up on my notes. You're going...
Paragraph 28.3.
Okay, sorry. It was given, after the design was done, it was given to Mansell and to Gillingham, the same process. But by then they'd realized I knew about it. So I would put it on a disk and just hand it over to them.
Did you then receive an instruction from Gavin Watson?
Yes.
What was that instruction?
Well, the instruction was that the specifications, I had to draw up the actual nitty-gritty specifications and the diagrams and the component level diagrams for the tender specification. So I asked one of the manufacturers, who's actually innocent in this, but I asked them to assist me in drafting the actual, because they're diagrams, they're plans, that type of thing. And that was Ilandre Fourie from Pinnacle Micro at that stage.
You told us earlier on when we were dealing with the fencing project that at that time the National Commissioner of the Department of Correctional Services was Mr. Linda Mti, is that right?
That is correct, sir.
when this one was happening that you are now testifying about, was he still the National Commissioner of Direct Correctional Services?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you.
Now, what you have related to the chair in relation to the discussions that took place involving, amongst others, Mr. Gillingham, in regard to the design of a system,
Yes, sir.
which you have described, and in regard to the preparation of a specifications document. When all this occurred, had an invitation to bid been advertised?
The invitation to bid was only advertised after the planning had gone into it, much akin to the fencing one. The bid document was only issued out, advertised on the 14th of October 2005.
And at that time, everything that you've narrated to the chair about this contract had already taken place.
That's correct.
Did you receive an instruction to respond to the invitation to bid?
Everything I did was based on instruction, Chair, that is correct.
And did a Bosasa company respond to the invitation?
No, it was done through Sondolo IT, which was a recently established company that was set up.
Now, when you say Bosasa did not and Sondolo IT did, you've already told the chair about Sondolo IT, but let's just remind him, did Sondolo IT have any relationship with Bosasa?
It's one and the same, Chair. The easiest way for me to explain it, Chair, is to say that every single company in the group has one bank account, and that is the singular bank account. So it all filters from all this gunge, filters into one central bank account. That's
So
all.
Sondolo IT Pty Limited was part of the Bosasa stable.
That's correct.
Right. Did you know when you received the instruction from Gavin Watson what the likelihood was of Sondolo IT being awarded the contract?
It was a given.
How do you know that?
Because it was prepped before the time. It was, everybody knew that this was going to happen. You know, the famous words were, "Don't worry about it, my mate. I've got it under control. We will get it." That's how it went.
Was Sondolo IT Pty Limited ultimately awarded the contract?
On the 3rd of March 2006.
That's about 5 months, in this case, after the advertisement of the invitation to bid.
Correct.
Let me just go back a bit to the issue of one account. As I understand you, you were saying there may have been a number of companies under Bosasa, but they shared one account, bank account, is that right?
Correct, Chair.
That bank account, who was the holder of that account, or which company had its name on that account?
If I recall correctly, and I'm sure I'm right, it was Bosasa Operations Pty Limited. I never had access to that account,
Yeah.
but I recall that was the account.
Okay, thank you.
The initial contract value of the contract in relation to the television services, what was that value?
It was 224 million rand, 364,480.
Was that an annual amount, or is that the total amount, certainly at that stage?
That was, as I mentioned earlier, Chair, where it all started. It then needed to grow.
All right, let's move on then to a different topic. You deal with in paragraph 29 of your affidavit, and it concerns Mr. MT and what occurred during 2006. Would you tell the chair, please, of what happened?
Well, in 2006, I remember it was actually very comical because poor Tony Perry had to subject himself to prayer meetings every morning and he didn't enjoy it and he would complain incessantly. But he was asked by Gavin Watson to register MT's company called Leonora Investments. Leonora is basically Richmond MT's mother's or late mom's name. But I remember it vividly because of the fact that poor Tony Perry was an elderly man, would have to come in and get on his knees, and he complained that his knees would get very sore in the prayer meeting.
Tony Perry was the company secretary.
That is correct.
Do you know why the company was to be registered?
I do not know why.
All right. And then you deal in paragraph 29.2 with events that took place during July 2007 in relation to the catering tender. Is
Correct.
that the catering tender of which we've spoken?
Correct.
What happened?
Well, the catering tender, the one that started in during July 2007, the catering tender was extended for a further year as it was about to expire in September of 2007. So it was then also further extended by another 6 months. The person that ensured it got extended was a lady by the name of Nonsikileko Jolingana. And she was the acting head at that stage of the bid adjudication committee of DCS. Now,
That name, Nonsekelo, would you spell it, please?
Nonsikelo.
Jolingana, huh?
That
Do you
is
know what position she held?
I thought you were spelling is it Nonsikelelo?
Sikilelo. I think that might be
The name is here. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Jolingana.
Nonsikelo, okay.
Yes.
It is in 29.2.
Correct.
Are you sure of that spelling?
I'm not sure of the
I'm
spelling.
instructed that
Chair.
you may be correct, Chair. It may be Nonsekelo.
It may be Nonsikelelo, yeah, that's a normal name rather than Nonsikelo.
We'll check that and
Yeah.
revert.
Well, my apologies if the name is incorrect.
No, that's fine.
But I actually, once one starts to read through this, Chair,
Yes.
one starts to remember things and it reminds you.
Yes.
I actually recall in the meeting where this was extended that there was an objection at the time from the Jenny Schreiner, and there was another person that objected, and there was a big furor about this. So perhaps, I don't know if the investigation team just wants to check up. There are minutes to that.
Well, let's just deal with that in a little more detail then. You say there was an objection from, amongst others, Jenny Schreiner.
Yes.
What position did she hold at the time?
She was at a senior level. I don't know exactly what position she held, but I do recall getting a call saying that this whole thing's not going down very well with everybody to have the extension, and they should have put it out on tender, which is correct.
Was she from within Bosasa or from within correctional services?
No, she was in correctional services. Sorry, I just jogged my memory now.
Yes,
but
no,
she
that's fine.
assisted. Well, not assisted. She was going against the protocol that should have been followed.
Yes.
So I recall that.
Yes.
Sorry.
But she was raising that objection in a meeting.
Yes, it was in the actual meeting.
Let's just clarify your evidence in that regard, because we don't want to get it wrong. You haven't mentioned Ms. Schreiner's name before. You say, if I heard you correctly, she was against the protocol that should have been implemented.
Correct.
And then you say she objected to the improper extension of the contract. Please clarify.
She was not happy that the contract would be extended like this. It needed to go out to tender again.
Right.
I remember that.
So the two extensions that you've referred to in paragraph 29.2,
Yes.
I understand your evidence to be these extensions should have gone out for further tender.
That is correct, Chair.
They didn't, and the contract was merely extended for the benefit of the Bosasa stable.
Chair, that is correct. I don't want to confuse issues by just giving this information right now, but it came to my memory, and I thought, let me just give it to you so the team can collaborate,
No.
that what we are putting before you is the truth.
No, that's an order.
Now,
but
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. So are you saying that the decision to extend that contract was taken in a meeting? And can you just say who was at that meeting, if you are able to remember?
Chair,
Or at least some of the people?
Chair, there were two people at the meeting that I know of.
Yeah.
And then the other members of the bid adjudication committee would have been there. But the record is there. We can pull the record.
Okay.
And we can verify it.
Okay, all right.
And you say that at that meeting, well, there must have been more than one meeting because the contract was extended twice.
Correct.
But at one meeting, several members of the Correctional Services Bid Adjudication Committee were present.
That is correct.
And indeed, the contract was extended on 2 occasions.
Correct.
First for a year and then for a further 6 months.
That is correct.
And that at some stage during that whole process, an objection was lodged by Ms. Schreiner.
The objection was lodged, for the record, on the first extension, which was a year extension.
But you might need just to be careful with the word lodged, because Mr. Pretorius has just used the word lodged in his question. You had simply said that she objected. Now,
Yes.
if you talk about lodging, that implies there was a document containing the objection. Is that what happened?
I don't know about that. I know that she raised a major concern.
She raised an objection.
And I think let's stick to that.
Yes, okay.
But I think
This matter was investigated.
Yes.
But
Or you
I
base it
understand,
on
I understand the
knowledge.
point you're making.
Yeah, on knowledge that you have. Okay, all right. Yes.
I'm not sure, I must stress at this stage.
Okay, but at least as far as Mr. Agrizzi is concerned, Ms. Schreiner raised an objection.
Correct.
In what form might be another issue.
Yes, let's ignore the word that
Yeah.
I used, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Did Mr. MT eventually resign as Commissioner of Correctional Services?
That is correct.
Do you know when that occurred?
I think, Chair, that was in November 2006.
Until then, had you had any direct contact with Mr. MT?
No, I had not.
Did you have any indirect dealings with him?
I just assisted with things that I was told to do by Mr. Watson, assistance in terms of documents, or if he needed some information or research done, I would do it for him.
Right. Now, you've told the Chair that from
Okay,
time
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. I'm just looking at 29.5 with regard to Mr. MT's resignation and what you said. You have just told us that he resigned, you think, around November 2006. The first line of sentence of 29.5 says, after MT's resignation, during approximately 2007, I met MT. So the one idea that came to my mind is that the approximately 2007 related to the resignation, but it's possible that it's there to say when you met MT for the second time.
Yes, so it's November 2006.
Yeah.
And then in 2007
Yeah.
of the new year, that's when I
your
met
second
him.
meeting.
So what I mean by that is
Yeah.
during approximately 27, it's a second meeting.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that period that you are talking about,
Yes.
approximately 2007, doesn't relate to the resignation.
No.
It relates to your second meeting with Mr. MT. Okay, all right.
So it should have read after 2006, during 2007. That's what it should say.
Okay.
Let's go back one paragraph. we haven't dealt with that. You've told the Chair that from time to time there would be negative publicity concerning Bosasa and its activities, and in particular its relationship with government departments.
That is correct, Chair.
Do you recall more or less when the first media publication of this nature occurred?
It happened in about 2005, Chair. Those were bits where it really started. And it was predominantly De Beeld and De Burger. It was Karine Duplessis, Adrian Basson, and it's marked in my bundle as Annex K.
Yes, let's go then to page 345 of the bundle. At page 346, there is a collation on that page through to page 348 of the content of various press articles.
That is correct.
And if one took time to read them, they are revelations in the press of the relationship between correctional services on the one hand and the Bosasa group of companies on the other.
That is correct.
And mentioned by name in those articles are, amongst other persons, Mr. Gavin Watson, Mr. MT, and Mr. Patrick Gillingham.
That is correct.
Right. Did these sorts of exposures of the Bosasa group of companies' activities continue?
Most definitely. It was perpetual.
And it was obviously a matter of some concern to Bosasa and its officials.
No, most definitely it wasn't comfortable.
Right, then the relevance of that will become apparent later, but would you then go on to talk of the meeting with Mr. MT during 2007? You've highlighted this for the Chair already.
Okay, Chair, during 2007, it was, I can't remember exact dates and that. I'd met Mr. MT for the second time, so it was in the morning sometime. I went with Mr. Watson to Richmond MT's house in Savannah Hills Estate, and I was informed, we sat outside waiting because he had gone on a morning walk or something, and we sat outside waiting, and Gavin said, "You see this beautiful house he actually was being facetious. He says, "You built for this politician," meaning that, he's saying that we worked and we earned the money, and then he would say that you actually built it because it was an expensive house. So I was also informed that all the furnishings in the house had been done. And later on, the scheme, when the SIU report broke and everything started coming out, I was then only really informed of the scheme that happened. Until that time, I did not know how they had done it. I suspected that there was bribery in terms of Richmond Tea and the house and all that, but I did not have a clue who had organized it, how it had been done, as it was very secretive.
Well, you provide detail on page 59, and perhaps you should place that on record.
Well, there's a company called Rikele Construction that's operating.
R-I-E-K-E-L-E.
That is the correct spelling there, Rikele. R-I-E-K-E-L-E. Which is operated by a gentleman of the name of Rian Hoeksma. He didn't only build that house, but he also was involved with the building of the house for Gillingham. And Gillingham's house was at Midstream Estates. It was, I think, Hutton Gate. I cannot remember Obviously, I'm not going to give out their actual addresses because that would put them at risk and that type of thing. So at this stage, Rikele Construction had been given a lot of work by Bosasa. He was busy revamping certain parts of Lindela. Then we bought up 2 hostels, the old hostels. One was called 2 North, and so they were doing a lot of work, and there was a lot of building taking place. So all the payment of these costs of these houses, the construction of them, was done via Bosasa, through Rikele or whatever. But the payment of these costs of the houses done by Bosasa was done via a company which Danny Mansell had set up to handle this type of thing. And it was called Grande 4, Pty Limited.
Grande, and then FOUR.
Correct. Grande. Okay. Is that fine?
Yes, thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
Okay. Subsequently, false invoices were submitted then by Grande 4 to Bosasa. So the reason I know about Grande 4 is because when we had to do a cleanup, we had to go specifically look for Grande 4. And we had to take the invoices out, and we had to change them manually as well. So they then submitted these false invoices into the books, where the original ones were destroyed when the SIU report started coming out. So
I'm sorry, just repeat.
Okay, let me explain
about
to you,
the
because it's a bit-
invoices being changed.
So what happened was, when we got wind of the SIU report coming out, we had to look for every single aspect that could be used to nail Bosasa, especially Gavin and Danny Mansell. So what had to happen was we had to drill down. The computerized system is called Great Plains Dynamics. So we'd have to drill down. You would do a search, Gillingham. So you type in Gillingham searches, and it would show up certain invoices. Those invoices, the detail on them would say, this was for Richmond MT. He wanted his room a little bit bigger, so we built an extra 400 square meters onto the house so that he had his own private swimming pool inside, and all that detail was there. So that detail had to be removed, and a dummy invoice put in its place, which said, work at Lindela. We built a stadium for the detainees to play soccer in. So it would be swapped with the invoice, because your reference can't be taken off the Microsoft system at that stage. So that's why there was fraudulent invoices going around. But it would need really forensic work, and I mean, that's why I've tendered my assistants to assist there.
Yes. Yes.
Does that clarify
Yes.
it for you,
Thank
Chair?
you. Thank you. It does. Thank you. You may proceed. Or
Was
Mr.
another
Pretorius.
method used to conceal expenses? You refer to that in the last sentence of paragraph 2951.
Yes. So what would happen is, and there was one specific example with the mezzanine floor that needed to be built and concrete needed to be thrown.
Where?
Sorry?
Where was this mezzanine?
This was
floor?
at one of the construction sites at Leipitz Vlei. If you want the detail, I can give you the detail, Chair.
No, it's not necessary.
Okay.
Sorry, you were going to talk of a method of invoicing that was
Okay,
used
sorry,
to
I thought
conceal
you
costs
went-
of the construction of the houses.
Okay. So basically, they inflated those costs and then put some of the houses' costs through there.
So for work being done by Bosasa, by the Bosasa stable, for government entity, invoices would be inflated and the money
That's-
used to pay for the building of the houses of Messrs. and T and Gillingham.
That is correct.
Then in 2952, you talk about the registration of the MT house in the name of a particular company. Would you tell the chair about that, please?
Well, it was I don't think this does it justice at all, and quite simply, it cannot be explained. one needs to do it forensically. But basically, the house was registered in a company called Autumn Storm Investments, which was a company which Rikele Construction had an interest in. That's how it was registered. The whole idea was that there was a tender put out for the accommodation of the National Commissioner at that stage. Rikele bid for it, got it, and then just basically moved him into the house. So the tender came out. I would prefer if we do a forensic on that, but to put it in a nutshell, a tender was promulgated, Rikele got the business, the house had been already built, and all that happened then was Public Works entered into a rental agreement with Rikele, and the department paid the rent every month for that property.
And the name of that company, as you recorded here, was Autumn Storm Investments 119 Pty Limited.
Correct.
In regard to the furnishing and decor at what we've referred to as the MP house, what were the arrangements?
Well, I'm commenting, Chair, on this because I found this out afterwards. I did not know what had actually happened there. But the Bosasa paid for the furnishings of both the houses. And Mark and Sharon Taverner owned and operated a company, I think it was Purple Prime Media, Purple Primula or something like that, which then saw to the furnishing and the decor and invoiced Bosasa for that.
And did Bosasa pay for the furnishing and decor?
Yes.
You then refer in paragraph 29.5.4 to the rental arrangements in regard to the empty house. You've told the Chair what you say here, that the house was rented by the Department of Correctional Services pursuant to some sort of tendering process, as you put it.
Chair, that is correct.
Right. And you say that rent was paid by the Department of Correctional Services to the company called Autumn Storm Investments 119 Pty Limited.
Yes, that is correct.
And what happened to that rental monies, to your knowledge?
The agreement, according to MT, was that rental monies would accumulate and accumulate and accumulate, and eventually once MT was out of politics and out of government, then we'd be able to, so it was a growing investment, we'd be able to then access the funds.
Who would access the funds?
MT.
Do you know whether this ever happened or not?
It wouldn't have happened because in 2009 with the release, or 2007 with the release of the SIU report, they wouldn't, it would be too obvious.
Right. So that was the agreement that was never implemented, according to your evidence.
That's correct, but it can be corroborated by the investigators.
Was there also any agreement about the final fate of the ownership of the house?
Well, yes, the house was supposed to be transferred over to him. That never happened. I believe that, the gentleman, Rio Muxma, took advantage of the situation and sold the house.
You have told the Chair that Mr. MT resigned as Commissioner in November 2006.
I'm sorry, before that. So, after the house had been built and finished, that is Mr. MT's house, is your evidence that the building and the finishing was never really paid for by MT himself, but it was paid for by Bosasa?
You're 100%.
Or he may have paid some portions, or you don't know?
Everything was paid by Mark and Sharon Taverner. The building was paid by Rikele Construction, and there was rental paid by Correctional Services.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Agrizzi, you say that Mr. MT resigned as National Commissioner in November 2006.
If I could recall correctly, correct.
Did he leave the house then?
No, he did not leave straight away. He left a while later. He relocated to another house, but he continued to pay the rent because he thought he was getting the money back from Rian Hoeksma.
Right. Do you know for how long he remained in what we've referred to as the MT house, the first house?
I refer to my statement, and I say in 29.5.5, it was approximately 18 months.
Yes, and then in 29.5.6 of your affidavit, you say that he then relocated to another house owned by him.
Correct, but just a correction, it was not at Savannah Hills, it was close to Savannah Hills. There's another estate just down the road.
So we should just amend that to a house close to
Savannah Hills.
Savannah Hills. So we delete in and put close to. Thank you.
Okay. So that was an oversight, Chair.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Did Mr. MT receive any benefit from Bosasa in relation to this house? And I'm talking about the Bosasa stable here.
Yes, most definitely.
And what was that?
Well, furniture, repairs, maintenance, variety of things. There's certain things that I know of and certain things I won't know of.
Right. And then you say in relation, I don't know to which house, because the house close to Savannah Hills, you say was owned by MT, but then you talk about a potential transfer. Please explain what you say in paragraph 29.5.7.
So later when Rian Hoeksma was supposed to actually transfer the house to MT, we actually said to him, I went to a meeting with Andries van Tronda, and we said, well, everything had kind of quietened down a little bit. So we said, we went to go see Rian Hoeksma and said, you need to transfer the house now. That was the agreement you had made with Gavin and Mansell and MT, because that told us that was the agreement. And Hoeksma said, oops, sorry guys, I've registered a bond over the house, and I used the rent to pay the bond.
All right. But which house are we talking of now?
We're talking about the Savannah Hills house.
But you say in paragraph 29.5.6, MT then relocated to a house close to Savannah Hills owned by him.
Yes.
But why was it necessary to transfer the house to him if it was already owned by him?
No, there's two houses. There's two different houses.
Which house are you talking of?
So the first one in 29.5.6 is the Savannah Hills, where he relocated to Savannah Hills. That is a complex, and we actually drove past it this morning. It is a complex right next door to Savannah Hills. Remember I said in 29.5.6, it should read, MT then relocated to a house close to Savannah Hills.
Yeah.
Savannah Hills is a complex.
Yes. You have told the chair that in relation to, let's refer to it as the first house, there was an arrangement or an agreement that it would ultimately be transferred to Mr. MT.
Correct.
Let's refer to that as the first house. Are you saying that house was actually in Savannah Hills?
Correct, Chair.
Okay.
Well, was one in Savannah Hills, another one close to Savannah Hills?
The complexes are right next to each other. Oh. One is a high-end complex, Savannah Hills.
Yes.
And then there's a slightly middle-class, upper-class complex next door to it.
Yes.
Which he also owned a property, but that one was registered in his name.
Yes.
So we then went, if you look at the chronology that I've put on page 60, is quite simply, MT relocated to the newer house. He then was living in the new townhouse, all right, in the estate close to Savannah Hills. I say in 29.5.7. Later on, so the house stood empty. The Savannah Hills house was empty. Later on, when Rian Hoeksma was supposed to transfer the house, things had got quiet. And Richmond MT actually asked us at one stage, what is happening with the house? So we went to go and see Rian Hoeksma. When we spoke to Rian Hoeksma, he said that he had registered a bond over the house and he was using the rent money to pay the bond. So in other words, where that house should not have been bonded, Hoeksma, because the company was in his name, went and registered a bond. He saw it as a cash cow.
Yeah, well, I was about to ask you, you said Rekele Construction had an interest in Autumn Storm Investments 119 Pty Limited. Who else had an interest in Autumn Storm Investments, if you know?
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, but your understanding is that Rekele held the majority of shares in Autumn Storm Investments.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if I can just clarify, and will not
Yes.
just explain. So you had Autumn Storm Investments. That company should have been transferred over to Richmond MT.
Yes.
That was the agreement.
Yes.
There should be no bond there or anything like that.
Yes.
Rian Hoeksma must have got himself into cash flow problems. So he went and registered a bond because then he got 4 or 5 million or 6 million rand out on the property. And he then says, we asked him, but you're supposed to have this pot of money where every month the rent was paid into, and you're supposed to not have a bond there. Now you don't have the pot of money, and you don't have the house because it's bonded up. But of course, he's got a beautiful game farm and all those type of things.
Now, when this happened, or when you discovered this, was it during Mr. MT's term as commissioner, or was it after he had resigned?
That was after,
It was after.
because that was specifically why everything had calmed down.
Yes.
And we went to go and see Rian Hoeksma to move the property into his name because he was asking for it.
Okay, thank you.
Does that clarify?
Thank you. Let's move on. Did you have occasion to meet with Mr. MT together with Gavin Watson at some stage after his resignation? I'm referring to the meeting at 29/6.
Correct.
Who attended that meeting?
Just repeat the question, sorry, I didn't hear that clearly.
Who attended that meeting?
Well, the meeting was attended by Gavin Watson, myself, and MT.
Right. And what occurred at that meeting?
Well, he wanted a proposal to be presented that he could utilize for presentation on the 2010 World Cup security.
And were you given any tasks?
Chair, I was given the task to prepare a security plan and assist him wherever possible in doing a presentation that he would at a later stage present.
In relation to the 2010 World Cup?
Correct.
Right. Did anything else of note happen at that meeting?
Yes, Mr. MT got his monthly fees paid over by Gavin Watson.
What did you see?
I saw the grey bag being given to Mr. MT.
The grey security bag?
Correct.
And when was this meeting, and where was it?
It was at MT's house.
The one close to Savannah?
No, this one was actually at Savannah still.
Oh, the one, okay.
Correct.
Yes, yeah. And when was it, if you are able to remember?
It was just before the World Cup presentation.
Oh, okay.
I'd say about 2-3 months before they did the World Cup presentation, Chair.
Thank you.
Right. How did you learn of this payment, apart from seeing the grey security bag being handed over? I'm referring to a discussion that you say you had with Gavin Watson.
I'm well aware of it.
In other words, what did he tell you?
You know, on the way back, I would drive the car normally. What happened was Gavin Watson jokingly said, you see, monopoly money. But this man delivers on his promises. Call him that fat man, delivers on his promises. He would always call fat people fat. But I'm just giving it, he said, that man delivers on his promises. If he promises something, he gets it done.
Talking about Mr. MT?
Yes.
Yes. But now, as at the date of this meeting that you deal with in paragraph 29.6, Mr. MT had already resigned from correctional services, isn't
No,
it?
that's correct.
Yes. Now, since he had already resigned from correctional services, what was Bosasa or Mr. Gavin Watson seeking, what benefit did they seek to get from him in giving him more money in these grey security bags? What could he still give Bosasa, or was it arrears from earlier?
This was because, I mean, as long as the contract lasted, the agreement with him and Watson was, as long as the agreement the contract lasted, he would be paid.
Well, I think yesterday you told us that I don't know if it was Mr. Makakula, one of the members of the Portfolio Committee on Correctional Services. I think you told us that when he, I think, left the Portfolio Committee or left Parliament, I'm not sure, payments to him stopped. But with regard to Mr. MT, payments did not stop when he resigned from correctional services.
Correct. And I mentioned the other lady as well, Mrs. Winnie Ngwenya,
Yeah,
and Ruben Pillay.
yeah.
So with the junior people, that's what happened. But because MT was instrumental, and Gillingham was instrumental in correctional services, that's why to today they're still being looked after. Because those contracts are still in place.
I'm sorry.
Because those contracts are still in place.
Did you just say till today or
Till
up to the time
Chair,
you
up
resigned?
to the time I left, which was on the
Yes.
15th of December 2016.
You are still getting paid
Correct.
monthly?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And that would have been, this was now you left Bosasa at the end of 2016?
15th of December 2016 was my
Yes.
last working day.
So that actually was almost 10 years to the dot from when Mr. MT resigned from correctional services. You said he resigned in November 2006.
Yes, you're right.
So for
More or
about
less.
at least 10 years thereafter, he continued to be paid.
That is correct.
monthly.
As a matter of fact, Chair, and I think it's further on, you'll see in my statement, I won't go there now, I'd actually refused to do a delivery, and Gavin Watson came to fetch it at my house, and he did the delivery.
Okay.
But I'll get into it later.
Yes, okay, thank you.
All right. You've referred the chair to a conversation that took place between yourself and Gavin Watson
Yes.
on the way back from the visit to Mr. MT.
Yes,
And during that conversation, mention was made of, quote, monopoly money, unquote, paid to Mr. MT, because Mr. MT always delivered on his promises.
correct.
The words used by you here, and it may be important, because Mr. MT had always delivered on his promises.
Correct. He always delivered on his promises. I don't understand the question.
No,
I think Mr. Pretorius was simply looking at the tense. That
Okay.
You
All right.
had said he had always, that is,
Had in the
up to that
past.
stage, what your understanding or what Mr. Gavin Watson had said was, prior to that, he had always delivered, so there was no reason
But
to doubt that he would deliver whenever he had made a promise.
Correct.
Did you learn anything about the frequency of payments and the amount of payments from Mr. Watson during that conversation?
No, it was only later after the conversation that I learned that it was a monthly amount and there was a monthly fee of 65,000 Rand a month. But from then on, I would start accompanying to more and more meetings.
Did you actually see transfers of grey security bags to Mr. MT?
Yes, I did.
On how many occasions, approximately?
Well, every month from when he was released from the World Cup and even before, but every month that Gavin Watson would go through to MT, I would accompany him. So it's phenomenal. I mean, at least for 25, 30 times.
And that's over what period, more or less?
From when he left correctional services, because that's when I really got to know him.
Yes, so from around end of 2006 up to the time that you left Bosasa in November 2016.
Correct.
There were a number of times, maybe 30 or thereabout, when you accompanied Mr. Watson.
That's...
And on some of those occasions, they would, either you or Watson would carry a grey security bag with money to hand over to him. Is that more or less what you are saying?
Spot on.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you, Chair, when was the Manga Polokwane elections? Because there's a timeline there as well that I can refer back to then. I'm just thinking now, what year was it? It was in December.
Well, Polokwane conference was, I think, was in 2007.
Yeah, sorry, it just ties up with what I was saying. Sorry.
Okay. All right, Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. Did you become aware at that time of any other benefits which the MT family enjoyed at the expense of Bosasa, or the Bosasa stable?
Yes, I did. I became aware of travelling costs that were paid for. I became aware that apparently a holiday was arranged by Gavin Watson's brother-in-law, Mark Taverner, at the Bushman's River. But I would be often tasked as well to arrange flights for the whole family. I was instructed to just make sure that everything went well. So I had to open up an account with Blake's Travel, and the account's name was in J.J. Fenter's name. There was payments for some of the studies of the kids. From the previous marriage, his son actually worked at Bosasa, and there'd be various other ways that we could assist and try and make him feel good.
So, after Mr. MT had left correctional services, is the position that there was nothing new that he was delivering to Bosasa? It was simply that the contract that Bosasa had obtained, or maybe I should say contracts that Bosasa had obtained during Mr. MT's time at correctional services was still going on, and the arrangement was that as long as that contract was still going on, he should be paid.
Of course.
Okay.
Who was J.J. Fenter?
That was actually my late father-in-law.
And did you say that that account was used to invoice and pay for travel expenses incurred by Mr. MT?
That is correct. And other people as well, other politicians as well would use that account.
Was your father-in-law alive at the time this account was used?
We just used the name.
Oh, you just
It was
used the
not
name.
registered or there was no, Brian Blake from Blake's Travel knew me exceptionally well and he wasn't interested in doing credit share. I just used the name JJ.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Let's just clarify that in case it's the subject of further investigation. Were the tickets booked in the name of JJ Venter or was an account registered in the name of JJ Venter?
I submitted all the documentations to the team and with the accounts as well. The accounts are in JJ Venter's name, but the tickets and the names on the tickets, for example, at the JS Festival and that, is in the person's name that actually did the travelling.
So, in cases relevant to him, Mr. MT.
Correct.
Right, and then you've told the Chair the information recorded in paragraph 29.8 that Bosasa paid for the studies of 2 children
Yes.
of Mr. MT.
That's correct.
Were any other services provided at the home of Mr. MT at a later stage after the World Cup?
Well, there was a security official put there to look after him by Bosasa. Joe Gumedi arranged it. There was an incident one evening, I recall, where Mr. MT pulled out a gun and there was an issue there and there was a driving under the influence. So those are the type of things. Is that the answer you're looking for?
No, I'm just asking whether security services were provided at the
That's
home
correct.
of Mr. MT.
The answer is that is correct, Chair.
And what services were those? You say the provision of a guard.
Correct.
Mr. Pretorius, I'm looking for the paragraph which deals with the payments of payments for Mr. MT's children's studies.
Yes, paragraph 29.8.
Okay, thank you.
Right, you then relate in paragraph 29.8 an incident relating to a criminal charge brought against Mr. MT. And please, if you would deal with the information you provide and tell the Chair how you come to know of what you are going to tell him.
Well, I wasn't involved in the sense that I had to go to court and sort out the thing. But Mr. Gumedi requested money once, cash money, he needed to bribe an official at one of the courts. And it was to pay, to make a payment to get rid of a drunken driving charge.
Do you know, I mean, that's why Mr. Gumedi requested the money according to yourself. You know of that, obviously.
That is true.
And you know what he told you, obviously.
Chair, that is true.
But are you able to confirm that the money was actually paid for the purpose you related?
I can't confirm that, Chair. I can only confirm what I gave Mr. Gumedi.
So you're telling the Chair that the reason you gave Mr. Gumedi the money that he requested was the reason related to you by Mr. Gumedi. You have no further evidence.
That is correct.
Right. And would you tell the Chair, please, of the further circumstance referred to in paragraph 29.8 regarding the submission of invoices?
Chair,
Maybe before he does that, Mr. Pretorius, are you able to recall how much money you gave Mr. Joe Gumede for the purpose that he told you, the purpose of getting rid of the criminal charge against Mr. MT?
Chair, I can't recall, but it would have been more than just pocket change. It would have been considerable. It would have been between 10 and 20,000 rand.
Okay, all right.
I can't remember the exact amount. Let me rather not say.
Okay, no, that's fine. Mr. Pretorius, you can maybe repeat your question.
Yes. In the last 5 lines of paragraph 29.8, you refer to certain circumstances which allowed money to be raised and paid to Mr. MT. How was that done?
Chair, And it's not the only one. I have to refer to another issue as well that happened, and that involved a business called Indlala, which started off with my son. But there were two issues. And sorry, my apologies, Advocate Pretorius. As I said, this was done very quickly. The issue with regards to my brother was that my brother Watson said, I happened to be in the car with Watson when I went to go and visit a business started by my brother. The business, Watson tried to get us to pay MT because MT at that stage was complaining that he wasn't getting a salary and the banks were starting to get suspicious and he couldn't deposit the cash. So he needed to filter money through my brother and put it through his business. My brother was very uncomfortable about it. I think he did one transaction and he terminated it. He said, listen, that's not how it's brought up, and he's not going to do it. So he was very annoyed with me about it. And basically what it was to pay MT money, and then Bosasa would be invoiced for electrical work or whatever work he did for them. So he was very uncomfortable about that. And a similar situation happened with my son. We started a consulting business, and what happened was I was asked by Gavin, because the son of MT wasn't, he was going through a rough patch, and he needed to be paired up with somebody who would motivate him and encourage him. So unfortunately, Watson said, well, there's Angelo, he's got a son, and my son was doing very well, and why don't you set up the two? So I asked my son, please, can you work with this guy, develop him, see what can happen. Maybe there's something in the future, because he was having phenomenal problems with this boy. So he needed a role model, he needed somebody to guide and inspire him. So, and I'm sorry this isn't in the affidavit, but I will follow up in writing. So what actually happened was my son got involved through me. I made the mistake. So there was a meeting held, I think we had it at Clearwater Mall at a restaurant. I tried to motivate the kid while my son was there. Richmond T was there, I was there, my son was there, and the youngster was there, his name was Vukani. And we had a chat, but nothing happened of it, because my son also turned around and said, look, I think he registered the company and then he just canned it. It didn't trade a day. So it was those type of situations that we were always subjected to, or I was subjected to. You got to speak to this one, you got to help that kid, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it started to have a toll on me and on my family, because my brother, who I'd raised, started looking at me and saying, well, why? My own son was being brought into this thing. It was, it was terrible. I recall, sorry, I'm diverting. Sorry, Advocate Pretorius.
Yes, perhaps as you've undertaken, you could take your time, record that evidence.
Yes, I will.
And if and when appropriate, we will deal with that by handing a supplementary statement up. But I'd like to clarify what you refer to in paragraph 29.8. Your brother would render fictitious invoices for electrical services rendered to Bosasa.
Correct.
The money which was then paid by Bosasa was handed over to Mr. MT.
Chair, that is correct.
And your brother, as you say here, became uncomfortable with this arrangement and the practice was terminated.
That is correct.
Didn't you say your brother only did one invoice?
I can't remember exactly. I think it was one or two invoices.
Okay.
And he just canned it. He was unhappy with it.
Chair, I'm about to move to a new topic. Oh, no, I'm not sure of what the arrangement should be. I'm told that lunch will only be served at 13:30 and not 1300, but I'm not sure that's relevant to whether we take the adjournment now or not. And I'm not sure of what today's arrangements are. We're going to sit until 5.
Yes, today we'll sit until 5 in terms of the arrangement yesterday, but I know nothing about
Yes,
that.
no, it shouldn't influence any decision now.
Yes.
I'm about to move to a new topic, would now be a convenient time.
Yes. From my side, I don't mind if we adjourn at 1:30, if that's going to be convenient for catering and lunch purposes for the legal team, but I don't mind if we adjourn now either.
Yes, I think in this case, my feet should take priority, Chair.
Okay, all right. We are going to take the lunch adjournment. We will resume at 2:00. We adjourn.
Thank you.